Hello and good morning.
Good morning.
How are you today?
Nice to hear your voice.
Oh, likewise.
Are you coronated?
Oh, I was going to try so hard not to talk about this.
I'm so sorry that the first thing I ask you is, I had lunch with a staunch Republican yesterday.
It's okay. It was interesting. It wasn't until yesterday that I realised I've gone from being pretty agnostic in relationship to the royal family, like having no particular perspective, thinking some of the stuff that they do is ridiculous, thinking that the Queen was really rather lovely in lots of ways, to being absolutely furious most of yesterday.
Oh, absolutely furious. Not equivocally furious.
Oh no, it was 2 feet planted right in righteousness.
This is a podcast in which two friends talk about the pleasures, absurdities, and imperfections of being human. I'm Simon Ellis.
And I'm Lee Miller. Welcome to Midlifing. I was kneading bagel dough in a house, alone. Bob was shopping for ingredients for the remainder of dinner. And I said out loud, Lee David Miller, what has happened to curiosity for you? Because I just thought, I'm just cross with everything I'm hearing. The radio was on and I was shouting at it. Where has curiosity gone? It's quite difficult at the minute for me.
Do you think it's more difficult now than it was 2 years ago?
I think it might be a little bit more difficult at the moment, and I think I don't know if this is global, and I would be interested to know people's perspectives from beyond these sceptred isles. Septic isles? I can't remember which. It does feel like off the back of a series of governmental changes and shifts and policies and behaviours and things like that, it's kind of hard to listen to anything without just immediately going, I'm cross. For me.
Well, I do have I certainly can recommend not. Like it is, I'm not sure about the politics of the ignorance. That sort of curious experience of people telling me bits of news. And it's such an interesting experience because it's just the news. It's just, this happened. And, sometimes it's, I guess, modified or filtered through the particular lens of the politics of that person. But more often than not, it's just, this happened. And and it's very curious because it's, and I think it's important that I would know that this happened, whatever that this is. But it certainly, I don't feel, it's not surprising really, but I don't feel wound up and bound up in all that is going on, or the machinations and the minutiae of the messiness of politics.
I think there's a point at which I do need to follow your lead.
But it's funny because we had my sister and I went out for a meal with a woman, a very dear family friend who also used to be our babysitter. We ended up having a conversation, the three of us, about the level of poverty in New Zealand and her, I think, disbelief. It was quite horrifying actually, and also something like as simple as the lockdowns. The quite stringent lockdowns that happen in New Zealand, and truancy rates have skyrocketed at schools and have maintained that level, and it's particularly bad, and the poverty is particularly bad, of course, amongst Māori and Pacific Islanders, and so there's something. She's never been one to mince her words, but was I think distraught and just basically saying it's fucked, meaning New Zealand. Like she used the words third world country.
Jesus.
Yeah, I know. It was really, and it's because Susan and I, of course, there's 6 years between us, and but more or less we grew up in the same environment. That doesn't mean we had the same experiences of the same environment, but we certainly grew up in more or less the same environment. And I think we have a certain, I won't speak for her, but I think I have a particular sunshine tinted perspective on what it's like, or what it was like, certainly to grow up in New Zealand. A sense of freedom, sense of freedom's probably the best word. That we were just running around, and safety, and it's that memory doesn't seem to be it doesn't seem to hold. Like, it doesn't seem to it seems to be just that the New Zealand that existed no longer exists. That's what I got from the conversation.
It's funny, isn't it? Thinking, I mean, it must be even more so for you that because you've got that prismatic experience of you've not only got memory, but you've also got the fact that you have lived in 2 other countries since then. Mm. And so your memory of your childhood is refracted through Australia and through the UK.
Yes,
and of course, I know you spent a lot of time in Italy as well, but certainly living and being part of the just the machinations of how to be an adult in a country.
Yes,
for you has been informed by 2 totally different places.
Yeah. And really, I really left New Zealand as I was 20, let's say 24.
I was similarly, when I think about my childhood, it's very glowy, it's very sunny, and I'm also, super aware that I'm sort of seeing everything through the lens of privilege. And it's not that I had a massively privileged childhood, in the sense that I grew up with staff and acres and all that kind of stuff, to go back to the coronation. But I grew up with 2 parents, living in a house, 2 incomes.
And also there's quite literally a safety net as well, isn't there? Like, if you'd fallen on your face, you'd be able to go back and they'd be able to loan you some money or whatever it is. There was...
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So certainly that's quintessential middle classness in terms of that safety net.
Absolutely, and it's taken me this long to realise that I had a middle class experience, when I was thinking that because my parents, my mum worked in a factory, my dad was a butcher, they both grew up in poverty. It's like, oh, so I'm working class, right? No, they are. They'd already done all the hard work by the time I came along. Mm. I never really thought of myself as working class, but you know what I mean, informed by those narratives. Yeah. But yeah, so it must be. It must be doubly or triply for you. And Susan, because she lived in France, didn't she?
Yes, Susan's lived in France, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom. I think that would be, yeah.
Yeah, so the 2 of you have both had that experience of something between New Zealand and here. So it was like, you staged withdrawal.
Yes, exactly. I think she more or less, maybe she was a little bit older when she left New Zealand proper. Maybe a little bit. I don't know. I have to ask. But
was it harrowing to hear your former babysitter give that context?
Yeah, it was shocking. Also, because the New Zealand that I have contact with is, and the New Zealanders I have contact with, there's families. They've got money. They all live in houses. There's lots of space. So I have a very partial view on life in New Zealand. People like me, and like me is in many different ways, not just, let's say, the colour of my skin, and so what it did, and as it does here when I have little conversations with people about poverty in this country, and is that it just, it's that terrible reminder of that, the way in which our cultures, when I say cultures, I mean in the UK and New Zealand, we're able to keep things at arm's length. Things are able to be kept invisible. And so when that veil is removed, it's and even just in this one instance, which is not physically rude in the sense it was just someone saying this. It's not like I was seeing it with my own eyes. It's shocking and also a reminder just of how one of the ways in which our economic system functions, or consumer capitalism functions, is to keep us isolated. When I say us, I mean to keep people who don't have money isolated from people who do have money. It's a very, very, it's pernicious, that just horrible, horrible, horrible. So to have that punctured so capably and articulately last night was very difficult. I don't know. I circled around there. I'm not sure I was being particularly clear about that, but yeah.
No, it's I think I hear what you're saying, and I think in some respects it's where we started this morning, which is I didn't think I was a Republican until I was reading yesterday about a local council who chose to put £500,000 of its money towards celebrations for the coronation rather than investing in a food bank.
Yeah. Or Prince Charles has said he would welcome paying taxes, and of course the irony of that is, as if only each of us could decide whether or not we wanted to pay taxes.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't. I think, as I say, Prince Charles. Anyway, yeah.
Well, unconsciously you joined the Not My King brigade.
Well, I don't really think of him as my king. I mean, I guess you might say he is, but I have quite a lot of time for King Charles, frankly. But no, I don't.
And I think, I probably have less time for the individuals because I find it difficult to get past the system.
Yeah,
which I was incapable of thinking about critically because of the weight of the number of years that Queen Elizabeth II had under her belt. So she was like a tree.
Yes.
If that makes sense. She was just so present in my life, and in moments. Not long ago we were talking about the Silver Jubilee and incredibly happy memories of a candy floss machine.
Yes. But it's funny. I actually think that the more pressing issue is one of representation, meaning for the most part, the politicians in this country, and I don't know New Zealand, it's just I've been out of it too long, have very little, the degrees of poverty in the country, or the degrees of privilege and poverty are so separated that it would be quite possible for an Oxbridge Eton and Oxbridge educated man to have no direct experience of any of that kind of poverty. And when I say direct experience, I don't mean their families, but I mean being amongst.
Having just seen it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's entirely possible. And so that means their capacity to, let's just say, empathize or imagine that is tragically limited, if not non-existent.
I know what you mean about the idea that there would be some people who could have lived through life without negotiating, encountering, or bumping up against poverty, even if they haven't lived in it.
Yeah,
but,
go on.
Shall we maybe segue into your big topic that we trailed at the end of last episode?
Yeah, so I was thinking, there's actually something that's, and I'm not going to I'm going to save it for next week. I think but it's like, it's prime time midlifing talk.
Oh, well, we can always defer.
No, I think that, I just think
Are you
that,
sure?
No, I think we shouldn't. I think we'll be letting people down then. I mean, people will be tuning in precisely for. So, it occurred to me this, and it was a very weird. You don't often have that feeling where it was biking into work in a very ugly part of town, just this one little bit, which is now mostly student accommodation, but there's just rubbish everywhere. It seems to be a place that people hang out and drop things. And in that charming part of the city, I had this thought, which was imagining myself to be a different person. Not in the kind of Mel Gibson inhabiting the body of, was it Helen Hunt? You know, those movies.
Oh my God,
those
I haven't watched that film. Yeah. Oh, although I did yesterday watch a film called Freaky, which stars Vince Vaughn as a serial killer, and he swaps bodies with a young teenage girl. It's very silly.
Is
and
that
very
like Freaky
fun.
Friday? Isn't Freaky Friday?
It's like Freaky
but
Friday
it's
if
like a
instead of
horror
swapping
version.
with your mum, you swap with a murderer. It's a very, very graphic horror film. It's very funny.
It's amazing how many films there are about that kind of, think of Big. There's
Yes.
there's one called, is it Something Nearly 30 or something like that? Something.
13 going on 30.
Jennifer Garner?
Yep. Yeah, that's right. Well done.
Thank you.
13 going on 30.
Thank you. I'm pretending as if
Friday.
I didn't just watch that last night. I didn't. Freaky Friday.
You've got two. You've got the Jodie Foster and the Lindsay Lohan versions.
That's right. Jodie Foster did. Oh, that's right.
I went to see that, the pictures.
Yes, I think I did as well, but I didn't see the Lindsay Lohan version. But it is a weird. It is a weird thing, though, isn't it? That we have that. There's that sort of idea about being someone else.
Yeah,
and I didn't,
of being someone else.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I didn't mean, imagine if I were Lee Miller. I meant another version of myself. And the next thought I had was quite simply, what are the things that come to mind that made me the way I am? That I can go, I think this was a pivotal thing in my life that has shaped my personality, that shaped, forgetting about the genetics, because of course I have a pretty strong sense that the genetic component of things is very strong, but of course I'm not. I'm very much it's a bit of that, a bit of genetics, and a bit of nurture, a bit of nature, a bit of nurture. So, if I would ask you that question, are there things that come to mind that you think I'm like this because of that, and because of that?
I think probably the most pivotal moment for me is my parents deciding to sell the pub that we lived in when I was 15 and move to a rural part of the UK when I was about maybe 3 months before my GCSEs.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, from a
GCSEs, for everyone who's not English, are which is about 30% of the people who listen. I don't know that, I'm just making that up. Are the, like, sort of as a 15-year-old, the first major public exams English people sit.
Yeah. You do them in the last mandatory year of high school.
Oh, yes,
because in
that's
the
right.
UK you can leave school at 16.
Yeah.
And then you've got a further 2 years of optional secondary education, which we would call sixth form. And you go and do your A levels. So it used to be O levels, ordinary level, followed by A levels, advanced levels, and then it became GCSEs, General Certificate of Secondary Education, with A levels, and then I think you can do BTECs and higher national diplomas and all sorts of things post 16.
Right.
I
could have used that little summary before I started as a lecturer at university here. That would have been really helpful, because I do remember hosting open days and parents asking me all these questions and me just looking at students with me going, could you answer that one? They were great at it too.
Oh, because they've gone through it.
Yeah, exactly.
And
exactly.
the and all those things like UCAS points were really important, and they would have them chapter and verse committed to memory.
I did think at one point I said, look, you can hear my accent. I have no idea about that. I'm going to pass it over. Anyway, so 3 months before you sat your GCSEs.
Yeah, and from this perspective, it's very easy to say that was a very poor parenting choice.
It does seem a little bit prickly.
It did have a negative impact on the outcome of my GCSEs. I was predicted to do much better than I did, but unsurprisingly, I was uprooted, sent to a new school. It was more like, maybe it wasn't 3 months, maybe it was 6 months. I don't know, but it was definitely halfway through my final year of GCSEs. We moved, at least halfway through, and then I was registered to do exams in the town where I had previously lived, so I had to go down and stay at friends' houses to take those exams. So it was
Wow.
really not very
Stable.
It wasn't elegant. Stable. There we go. It wasn't very stable,
Yeah.
and it is easy for me to kind of go, that was a stupid thing that my parents did. But I also, even then, I knew my parents left school at 14 with no formal education. They had no, my parents don't have O-levels or CSEs, which were what predated GCSEs. They don't have any formal qualifications at all.
So it wasn't really, you suggesting that it wasn't even occurring to them that this was a big thing to do. They were thinking about the family, the sort of bigger picture of the family, not your GCSEs.
Absolutely. They understood kind of conceptually that exams were important, but they didn't have any lived experience of what it meant to take one.
That is, well, I have to say, it is pretty amazing, just that perspective, which is to say, even as you say, you're describing this as a kind of monumental or very important thing in your life, to be able to, what a thing we can do, human beings can do, which is to imagine the experience of the other people in that situation and to not see it as just something that was happening to you that just affected you, as you said, sort of negatively in terms of there are many other things going on.
Yes. I think, and I might be romanticizing my own capability of being thoughtful and 360 in my vision, but I don't remember any rancor or disappointment or frustration or thinking, there was certainly no point where I acted out. I didn't
Look what you
have
did to me
with anybody. Yeah, never did that.
Yeah.
Because I understood there was a decision that was bigger than me. So we moved, and yeah, it had a negative impact upon my exam results. But what it also meant was that the plan that I had, in my senior school where I did my GCSEs, where I did my first 5 years of secondary education, I was brought in to see the headmaster. Everybody was brought in to see the headmaster. This wasn't unusual for me. And he said, let's talk about careers. What would you like to do? And so he effectively had a careers chat with us at some point towards the beginning of the 5th year, the year that I would be taking my GCSEs. And I said, I'd really like to go into performance. I'd really like to train to be an actor. That's something I would like to do. And he said, well, that's just not realistic. People don't get jobs like that. Your parents own a pub. I think you should probably go into the hospitality industry. You're clearly very capable in that field. You're very personable. I think you'll do well. Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.
And I think the hospitality industry has missed out, hasn't it?
I mean, I think I would have made a very, very personable waiter or restaurant manager. Absolutely. No doubt about it.
Yeah.
But I think that sense that what I was interested in wasn't being heard or listened to or recognised, and just like, off you go. Yeah. That's not what you should just go on to be. There wasn't a discussion about should I do A-levels, none of that. Just you should leave school and go and effectively work in your mum and dad's restaurant.
He was basically the principal.
Yes,
was basically using kind of Bayesian probability stuff by just going, what are the chances of you being a publican and following in the footsteps of your father were much, much greater. It was much more likely to happen. And so he was just he was playing the numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And as a result of my parents moving, I didn't have a support system. So I didn't have friends. I didn't know the area. I didn't know what to do or where to go, and so I fell into doing A-levels because I couldn't get a job because I didn't know where to go and get a job. Or
so if
anything
you'd
like
stayed,
that. And,
you might have left school.
Oh, I would have left school.
You're
I
kidding.
would have left school at 16. No, not at all. I would have left school at 16, and I would have got a job.
And we wouldn't be having this conversation now.
No. So that's what I think, again, why
Wow.
it's easy for me
Wow.
to be
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
sanguine about my parents moving,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
although it had I look at my GCSE results and go, "Ooh, God, I don't look very clever on paper, do I?" I mean, I'm pretty confident that the paper that came afterwards has shifted that narrative somewhat.
The curly PhD scroll.
What about you?
Well, the thing, I mean, I don't, certainly, as we've talked about, turning up to a dance institution and ending up doing auditions and ending up changing my career into being a dancer was a pretty pivotal moment in terms of, professionally, I guess. And I would say my father died when I was 27, and I think that the weight of that and the things I've read and the things I've thought about, even, let's say, more sort of conceptually about the nature of time, for example, that was extraordinary. And doubled down on that since Gabriel, since my mother died. And but I have to say, I think if I think about the shaping of how I am as a human being, meaning how I am in relationships, how I am at work, how I respond to particular situations, was completely about being bullied as a teenager. There's no question that my personality and how I saw people, how I trusted people or didn't trust people, how that was transformed over the course of that year as a 13-year-old. No question. When I was seeing a counsellor back in London, for years, and just really enriched by the complexity of that sort of emotional world, and also the weird thing about anyone who's ever seen a counsellor or a psychologist, paying someone to do that is I felt so icky about it. It was really weird, that sort of, why is it not feel okay to pay someone to effectively reflect on and respond and to listen to what, it's anyway, that's just an aside. But one of the very early sessions, we talked about this very thing about that 13-year-old boy, and just how much to carry for a young person at that time. And as I was walking home, I just bawled. I bawled and bawled. It's been a long time since I cried like that, which is, and was entirely about the feelings for him, if I separate myself from him, which of course is absurd. But yeah, it was something that was like, well, maybe it isn't. Maybe like a grown man recognizing that pain of that young person, and really just, so it was beautifully cathartic.
I'm caught about that idea of thinking it's ridiculous to be sad for the 13-year-old. That idea of being separate from, but actually I think if you can't think of yourself as separate from those versions of yourself previously, is it not really, really difficult to move on from something, or let's say to heal from something rather than to move on?
Yeah,
because you are still that person who has been wounded, aren't you?
Yeah. It really was. It was an extraordinarily beautiful experience. And hard, but very, very beautiful.